Hey guys, it's Nick here, back in with another documentary history video. Today's documentary video is on the recently retired Hawker Siddeley Type 12 cars on the MBTA Orange Line of Boston, Massachusetts. This documentary has been in the works for almost a year now, and I've been working really hard the past few months to bring everything together for all of you today. And I am so excited to share this with you, as I personally believe it is my magnum opus of my channel. The biggest video I have ever made in terms of production, length, and everything. It's insane. So, what is this documentary all about? Well, it is the entire story of the MBTA Type 12 fleet on the Orange Line, all the way from when the contract with Hawker Siddeley Canada was created and signed, all the way to the present day where scrapping of the fleet is currently underway. This documentary has 10 main chapters, and one extra one at the end, as to sort of wrap it up, if you know what I mean. But before we get started, I do want to get a few disclaimers out of the way. First, this documentary is long, and I mean really long. It is over an hour long, feature length, which I for one am very proud of, since it's the first feature length film I have ever made. So, be sure to grab some popcorn, get comfy, because it's quite the watch. Or if you just want to listen, that's fine too. Second disclaimer I want to get out of the way. I used a lot of reference material and media in the creation of this documentary. Images, videos, audio, vectors, all that sort of stuff. And I'm pretty sure I've cited everything in the credits section, and you will see how I have it laid out when we actually get started with the video. But I just want to let all of you know about that. So those of you who just start going to the comment section being like, oh, my video or image was not cited. If it was not, please do not panic. Just let me know in the comment section below, and I will be sure to credit you in the description of the video alongside with all of the other material that I have cited in there as well. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So again, if I did miscite or did not cite a certain piece of media, please let me know in the comment section below, and I will cite that. I will be sure to cite it. All right, with that out of the way, there's just one last thing I want to get out of the way before we get started. I want to thank my community, and especially my close friends, for helping me with the production of this video in terms of script writing, research, content gathering, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you guys' help in the production of this video, and I would have not been able to do it all on my own. So thank you all so much for that. And of course, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment in the comment section below, giving your story or opinion on the subject matter, and I will respond to you. And of course, subscribe to my channel, as I post a lot of cool MBTA/transit related content, and I'm sure all of you would absolutely love my videos. So now, without further ado, let's get started. I give you Riding into the Sunset, the legacy of the MBTA Orange Line Type 12s. Chapter 1: Creation of the Contract. It was 1973, and the MBTA was looking to replace the existing fleet of subway cars on their blue and orange lines. The existing fleet on those lines had a rolling stock that was nearing the age of 30 years old and were in need of a replacement. The MBTA reached out to Hawker Siddeley Canada of Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, with a contract to build 190 new subway cars for its rapid transit lines, 70 cars for the Blue Line, and 120 cars for the Orange Line. On August 19, 1976, Hawker Siddeley Canada signed the contract and reached an agreement with the MBTA to design and manufacture the new rapid transit cars at a cost of $115 million. At the time, the contract with Hawker Siddeley Canada was touted as, quote, the largest single procurement contract ever issued by the MBTA. The Urban Mass Transit Administration provided 80% of the funding for these new vehicles, with the cost of each Blue Line vehicle being $540,000 and each Orange Line vehicle being $550,000. Chapter 2: Design and Engineering. Throughout the rest of 1976, top designers from the Canadian car division of Hawker Siddeley sketched up a render of what the design for the cars would be. The original render sketch took design cues from the recently built Pullman Standard 15 and 1600 series subway cars on the Red Line, dubbed as the Silverbirds for their natural aluminum finish on the exterior body of the cars. The exterior of the cars would have a similar natural aluminum finish, similar to the Silverbirds, with a thin stripe on either side of the car, indicating which line it would be on. The team liked the design that they made, but they thought that some changes could be made. By 1977, the exterior design was solidified and put into production. While the design team solidified the exterior design, engineers began working on designing the mechanical components of the cars. The engineer's mechanical design called for a propulsion system that consisted of 4 General Electric GE1256 traction motors, an air-ride suspension system instead of the traditional steel spring suspension, a Wabco air compression braking system, and Tomlinson-style couplers. The design also called for the entire system to be powered by 600 volts DC current picked up via third rail. After the engineers solidified the mechanical design, they moved on to the interior. As for the interior, the team designed an interior that would seat 58 people with 6 pairs of 4-foot wide electro-pneumatic sliding side doors and a passenger announcement system that utilized 6 interior speakers for the public address system. The entire design was then finalized and production began. Chapter 3: Manufacturing. After the team finalized and approved both designs, they were then blueprinted and production began. Manufacturing and assembly of the fleet was completed in the Canadian Car and Foundry manufacturing plant located in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada. The manufacturing of each car was split into 2 divisions, exterior body and undercarriage. The exterior body was forged out of Corten steel, with each body panel being formed from a large sheet of steel and cut to the proper size. Corten steel was chosen for its superb strength and corrosion resistance. Each body panel was then welded to the base frame, and the rest of the layers would be added on top after each piece was completed. Once the exterior body was constructed, it was then painted. One of the design modifications the team made to the overall design was the appearance of the exterior body. Instead of going with the natural metal finish similar to the render sketch, they decided to give the car a flashy painted design. The design called for a stone gray roof, pearl white for the top half of the body, a shade of bright orange for the bottom half of the body, and another section of stone gray for the bottom side skirts. The undercarriage components were forged from traditional steel that were poured into special molds. Once the steel had cooled within the molds, assembly of the propulsion system began. The bogie was assembled first, with the traction motors being installed first, followed by the axles and then electrical equipment. After each bogie was completed, it was then mounted to the undercarriage of the car and fastened in place. After the body and undercarriage were complete, the interior of the car was installed. The interior called for a late 1970s, early 1980s era aesthetic. The interior would consist of beige plastic for the walls, window frames, and interior doors, and faux wood paneling would be used for the walls at the front and back of the interior cab, door sills, and the seat dividers. After the walls were assembled, the rest of the interior would come next. 58 stainless steel seats would be installed, with the seats featuring a bright orange cushioned leather insert that would be fixed to the stainless steel frame. After all the seats were installed, the handrails and straps would come next. The handrails were also made of stainless steel and bordered the top half of the car and the seat dividers with nylon hand straps covered in rubber, installed at critical places for easy reachability. Once the interior was completed, the final inspection of the car was conducted, where the engineers would inspect the car from undercarriage to passenger cab and make sure everything was installed correctly and functioned as intended, conducting critical inspections on the propulsion and air systems. Once the completed car had passed the final inspection, it would be moved to a siding in the Canadian Car and Foundry yard, where it would await delivery. Chapter 4: Delivery. With the final assembly of the first 20 Orange Line cars complete, delivery of the Hawkers began in December of 1979. Back then, most new subway cars built in North America were delivered by rail, which meant they would travel to their destination via existing rail infrastructure instead of being loaded on a flatbed truck. The 20 completed Hawkers would be coupled up to a diesel locomotive and pulled all the way from Thunder Bay, Ontario to Boston, Massachusetts. The first leg of the journey had Canadian National Railway pulling the cars from Thunder Bay to the US-Canadian border. At the border, the cars were recoupled to a freight train operated by Boston and Maine, where they would continue the journey towards Boston. After crossing into the state of Massachusetts, the cars made one last intermediate stop at Boston and Maine's rail facility in Somerville, Massachusetts, where they once again changed hands, this time to Conrail. From there, the cars were pulled by a Conrail diesel locomotive from Somerville to Wellington Maintenance Facility in Malden, Massachusetts. With the long journey finally over, delivered cars were decoupled from the locomotive and one by one rolled into the main yard. From there, the yard crews remarried the pairs and prepared them for a test run along the Orange Line test track that ran along the line from Wellington Station to Community College Station. While the rest of the deliveries took place, cars 1208 and 1209 were shipped to Pueblo, Colorado, where the United States Department of Transportation conducted their official engineering evaluation of the cars. The main focus was to test if the cars had a ride quality and performance that met the standard procedures of the Toronto Transit Commission. Once performance testing in Colorado had concluded, cars 1208 and 1209 were shipped back to Wellington Maintenance Facility and rejoined the rest of the fleet. Finally, after months of waiting, the public got its first ride on the brand new cars. On February 16, 1981, the first set of Hawkers began revenue service running between Oak Grove Station and Forest Hills. The consist of the first train put into service were cars 1200, 1201, 1202, and 1203. Chapter 5: A Brand New Fleet. With the new fleet of cars now in revenue service, let's talk about the advancements in technology that the Type 12s introduced. Prior to the contract with Hawker Siddeley, the existing fleet on the Orange Line consisted of 100 Pullman Standard Type 11 series rapid transit cars. Those cars were introduced back in 1957 and 1958. The technology that was included on the Type 12s was state-of-the-art and featured some of the most advanced technology of any car seen previously. The Hawker Siddeley Type 12 fleet consisted of 120 cars numbered 1200 through 1319. Each car measured 65 feet in length, 9.3 feet in width, and 11 feet 11 inches in height. And each car had a weight of 68,780 pounds. Each Type 12 car was a single-ended car that would be married or permanently coupled to another car, as the cars could not operate on their own if decoupled. The cars were designed to utilize both auxiliary equipment present in the married pair. The Type 12s featured a full-width operator's cab with a single-lever master controller designed and manufactured by Wabco. The master controller had 4 power notches, P1 through P4, and 2 indicated braking service positions, minimum and full service. The cars had a maximum design speed of 65 miles per hour and a nominal acceleration of 2.5 miles per hour per second. The side doors were controlled by drum switches mounted beneath the operator's cab window on either side of the cab. The 6th set of doors consisted of 12 in-body electro-pneumatic sliding doors, the width of each door frame being 4 feet. When the doors opened, a click would sound, which would be the electromagnet unlocking the mechanism, followed by a whoosh, which would be the air piston pulling the mechanism into the opened position. When closing, a 2-tone analog chime would play from all the speakers indicating that the door was closing. Air from the piston would push the mechanism back into the closed position, and the same click would sound again, indicating that the doors had locked. The PA system utilized 3 microphones that were located in 3 places within the cab. A gooseneck microphone was placed on the right crash pillar near the master controller, and 2 additional handheld microphones were placed beside the cab windows. When an operator or guard would make an announcement on the PA system, another two-tone analog chime would play, with the second note being lower than the first. The announcements and chimes would play through 7 speakers located within the car. 6 speakers were placed on the roof of the passenger compartment, and the other speaker placed on the top left side of the cab roof on the exterior. A special quirk of the Type 12s is that every analog PA system had different sounding chimes, each varying in pitch and speed, with all 120 cars having their own unique chime that, when combined, would make some really musical tones. The ride quality of the Type 12s was unlike any other train previously. The 12s came with an all-new air ride suspension system. Fleets previously used conventional steel spring suspension. The air ride suspension was a lot more graceful with its equalizations and was a lot more responsive than the suspension present in the 11s. The Type 12s also featured an all-new braking system that were designed by Wabco. The system utilized 4 friction brake pistons that were powered by a D4 air compressor. Another new technological improvement with the Type 12s was the addition of regenerative braking. Regenerative braking is a type of braking mechanism that decelerates the train by converting kinetic energy from the motion of the train into electrical energy, using the motor's natural resistance to slow it down. Once the train had reached a low enough speed, the friction brakes would apply, bringing the car to a halt. One benefit of regenerative braking was that it inflicted less wear and tear on the brake shoes. When a 12 would depart, air from the brakes would be released, producing the most unique brake release sound of any train in all of Boston. When comparing the Type 12s to the Type 11s, the Type 12s were a technological leap compared to the fleet it was replacing. Chapter 6: Orange Blossoms. With the first set of 12s in passenger service, the MBTA soon began putting more of the delivered cars into active service. By December of 1981, 100 of the new Type 12s were in active service. By 1982, all 120 cars were now in active service, with 96 cars being used on the line for passenger service and the remainder being maintained at the shops at Wellington. Although with the introduction of the new fleet, it did come with its own controversy. The crews at Wellington were originally against the contract for the Type 12s, as the previous fleet, the Type 11s, had received a midlife overhaul in the mid-1960s going into the 1970s, and still had a solid 25 years of life still in them. The crews were so against the change that they even went on strike. Nothing came of this strike, unfortunately. However, a settlement was reached, and deliveries of the Type 12s continued. By 1982, all 100 Type 11 cars were retired and scrapped, with cars 1178 and 1179 being donated to Seashore Trolley Museum, where they would be preserved for future generations. By 1983, the new fleet of cars were doing fantastic, with their first few years of active revenue service being very successful. At this point, the railfan community had adjusted to the change and began to love the cars. Railfans gave the new Type 12s the name Orange Blossoms for their bright shiny orange paint on the exterior and for the bright orange leather seats within the interior. The public also loved the Type 12s, taking a liking to the then modern interior and stating that the ride was a lot more comfortable than the 11s. In particular, they said the cars felt a lot cozier to ride in because of the bucket seats, as well as the combination of beige and wood for the interior walls. Chapter 7: The Southwest Corridor. Following the transition from the Type 11s to the Type 12s, the Orange Line had become a lot more comfortable and reliable with its new fleet of cars in passenger service. Now, you might be thinking that the Orange Line was done making major changes for the time being, but something big was on the horizon for the Orange Line that would change the entire identity of the line as a whole. That change would be the move from the elevated to the Southwest Corridor. From the 1960s all the way until 1978, the state of Massachusetts was planning on extending I-95 to meet up with Route 128 and connect the various neighborhoods in between with the main city. From 1966 to 1976, over 1,000 residential and business buildings were demolished to clear land for where the highway would be built. During this time, the public was not happy that a highway was being built through what was once a thriving neighborhood. The protest movement, Stop I-95, People Before Highways, was established, with the residents of Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, and the South End fiercely opposing the Southwest Expressway project. By 1978, there was enough pressure from the public that the state of Massachusetts abandoned the Southwest Expressway project and handed it off to another bidder. The bidder who would eventually take control of the project would be the MBTA. For some context, throughout the 1970s and 1980s, residents who lived right next to the elevated Orange Line along Washington Street began to complain about the elevated. Common complaints were the loud screeching from the trains passing by, the dilapidated infrastructure that was falling apart, as well as the effect that it had on property value within the area. Alongside these complaints, the MBTA examined the Washington Street elevated and made a concerning discovery. They had discovered that the structural integrity of the elevated had deteriorated extensively throughout the previous decade, and if they were to keep the line in its current elevated state, all of the existing elevated structures would have to be demolished and completely rebuilt if they were to keep the line in its elevated state. Of course, this option would not be the best, since if they were to rebuild the L to address the structural problems, it would mean they would have to shut down service on the entire south side of the Orange Line for potentially years to make the replacements. Given these two predicaments, the MBTA began planning to relocate the Orange Line to somewhere more suitable for the long term. Originally, the MBTA was planning to relocate the Orange Line to the median of the proposed Southwest Expressway. Unfortunately, the I-95 project fell through, and the MBTA had to figure out what to do with the Orange Line. Fortunately, the state of Massachusetts was looking for another builder/contractor to take up the abandoned project and use the space that had been cleared. The MBTA saw the opportunity and won the bid to fill the construction project. With the MBTA now in control of the abandoned Southwest Expressway project, the Southwest Corridor project was announced. The Southwest Corridor called for a central rail line that would be used by the commuter rail and Amtrak to connect Boston's South Station Terminal to Route 128 and the Northeast Corridor that was owned by Amtrak. Alongside this, a 4-mile stretch from the south end of Boston to Forest Hills and Jamaica Plain would be used by the Orange Line. The public approved of this proposed project, and construction of the Southwest Corridor began in 1979. By February of 1987, the Southwest Corridor was nearing completion with an anticipated opening date of May 4, 1987. With the opening date looming near, the MBTA began making preparations to begin service on the Southwest Corridor, loading 4 cars of the Type 12s onto flatbed trucks and transporting them to the newly built Forest Hills layover yard. Throughout the last few months of the Southwest Corridor construction, the MBTA rigorously tested the 4 Type 12s on the new line, ironing out all the kinks and power problems so that they could begin revenue service with no issues. On April 15, 1987, the MBTA announced that the Washington Street portion of the Orange Line would shut down for a period of 4 days so that they could move all of their remaining equipment from the elevated to the Southwest Corridor. During these last few days of the elevated and revenue operation, residents who lived next to the Washington Street elevated were photographing, videoing, and experiencing the elevated while it was still around. For some context, the MBTA's Orange Line, or formerly the Boston Elevated Railway, Main Line Elevated, was one of the first elevated electrified rapid transit systems in U.S. history. With the end growing near for the elevated, residents took up the opportunity to preserve what they saw as a critical part of Boston's history. Given this major transition and historical significance, the MBTA decided to do something special on the last night of the Washington Street Elevated in operation. On April 30th, 1987, the MBTA ran one last non-revenue train along the Washington Street Elevated as a farewell voyage before the L would be closed down and demolished. The MBTA chose cars 1243, 1242, 1309, and 1308 for the final voyage event. People who attended the event brought champagne, video recorders, and cameras, and celebrated the end of the very first elevated rapid transit systems in Boston and US history. And the Type 12s would go down in history as the last train cars to run on the first elevated transit system in all of US history. Finally, on May 4th, 1987, at 5:05 a.m., cars 1201, 1200, 1248, and 1249 took their inaugural trip down the newly opened Southwest Corridor.
Good morning, Orange Line riders. It's the first revenue trip from Hawker Siddeley Station to Oak Grove Station. It's a pleasure to have you all aboard today. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride.
Chapter 8: Political Intervention. With the turn of the new millennium, there is a serious problem for the MBTA as a whole. Politics and the MBTA are completely entwined. After all, the MBTA is a public transportation system. Until the year 2000, the MBTA could count on a balanced budget because the state would fully subsidize their operations. Basically, the state would pay for any expenses beyond any MBTA earnings, such as fare and advertising income, at the end of each year. With the new millennium, changes came to the financial operations of the MBTA through political intervention. The Forward Funding Act, signed by then Governor Paul Cellucci, tried to make the MBTA more self-sufficient. The state would now only give the MBTA 20% of state-earned sales tax. The fixed percentage was problematic because the total amount varied each year. In fact, sales tax did not increase over time as projected. The result became expenses that increased yearly, but income did not keep up. Furthermore, at the same time, the MBTA was assigned $5 billion in debt from the Big Dig project, and it has been a financial disaster since. Turning our attention back to the 12s, as the new millennium rolled in, things for the Hawkers started to decline when a few major issues popped up. The first major issue being the parts crisis. In 2001, Hawker Siddeley Canada, the company that manufactured and supplied parts for the cars, went defunct. The company was struggling for much of the 1990s, and by the year 2000, the parent company, Hawker Siddeley of the United Kingdom, announced that all of its Canadian division's assets would be split up and acquired by the Urban Transportation Development Corporation, otherwise known as UTDC, which was a subdivision of Bombardier Transportation. This, in and of itself, was not a major issue. However, UTDC decided to no longer produce parts for the Hawker fleet that the MBTA had purchased. When the MBTA was informed of these events, it decided to purchase the molds to forge the undercarriage parts so they could continue making parts for the fleet. After acquiring these molds, they were shipped to Massachusetts, where the MBTA began forging brand new parts for both their Hawker fleets from the Everett car shops. Chapter 9: Full Damage Control. Fast forward to 2005, and the MBTA was in the process of replacing the Hawker Siddeley Type 4 fleet, also known as the 600 fleet, on the Blue Line, which were the sister cars to the 1200 fleet. A contract was signed with Siemens in 2001, and production of the Type 5 fleet, for the 700s, began. At this time, the MBTA was looking to replace the aging Hawker fleet on the Orange Line as well. Initially, when the MBTA created the contract with Siemens, they did not make an additional contract to replace the Orange Line fleet as well. The MBTA was debating on putting up another bid to build new cars for the Orange Line, but unfortunately their timing for this replacement proposal couldn't have been worse. In 2008, the financial crisis and subsequent recession was in full swing.
Dow plunged to a record low yesterday, reaching 777 points and closing the day at 10,365. And that is the largest single-day point loss ever.
Ridership dropped, and most companies in America were hoarding cash so as to not go financially bankrupt. Furthermore, the MBTA did not have the finances to replace the fleet due to all the debt that they had incurred from the Big Dig project, as well as the changes in revenue. In a recession, people spend less money, and thus sales tax income is not good. Due to these factors, the MBTA decided not to replace the Orange Line fleet. On a side note, in 2008, the MBTA began replacing all of the black cushioned leather seat inserts from the Red and Orange Line fleet with a new carpet seat insert to combat vandalism. These new seat inserts had no foam cushioning between the cover and the inserts, unlike the old seats. The change in seats was made to counter vandals who would take knives and rip holes in the seats. Unfortunately, with this change, comfort was sacrificed in order to be more durable. Turning our attention back, after the 2008 financial crisis, the MBTA had some confidence that the fleet would be able to hold up for another few years while they figured out a contract to replace them. Unfortunately, that decision would come rather fast because between the years 2011 and 2013, the Boston area was hit with some of the biggest snowstorms the city had seen since the 1970s. The Boston area was hammered with more than 25 inches of snow in a matter of 2 days. This amount of snow that fell from these snowstorms paralyzed all of the MBTA's lines, with several of their fleets suffering from snow ingestion in their propulsion systems, as well as critical power infrastructure being iced over completely. The two lines that suffered the most from these blizzards were the Red and Orange lines. The Orange line in particular was having serious issues with the Hawker fleet, since there was a design flaw that had not been realized up until this point. The design flaw was due to the arrangement of the traction motor and the traction motor filter cover. The primary issue was that snow was getting ingested directly into the traction motor. As stated by Joe Keefe,
what I'd like to point out is the proximity to the rails. The bottom of the traction motor is approximately 6 inches above the running rail. Normal conditions, not only during a snowstorm, but probably for the 2 or 3 day period afterwards, snow level would be roughly the top of the running rail. So these things are very, very exposed to the elements.
During the heavy storms, the loose snow would get kicked up and accumulate by the traction motor filter cover. Keefe also describes how a lot of the mountings for the traction motor filter covers began cracking in certain areas close to where it was mounted due to the constant vibrations from the cars running along the line.
The other thing that we're finding is a lot of these filters, due to the age and vibration of the fleet, are actually cracking in this area here. So they're not as tight. The seal is not as good with the motor itself. This is one of the prototypes, and it's a beefier material. You see that we've added also a weather stripping along the outside here, and what we're trying to do is to stop the snow ingestion anywhere except through the filter where it's designed to go.
Keefe also stated that the fleet had recently reached the 1.4 million mile marker, which also had implications in terms of durability for the individual parts. Due to the cracks in the filter cover, snow that was either loose or melted seeped right into the top of the traction motor, causing a short and rendering the entire motor inoperable. Unfortunately, when a traction motor fails, it causes the rest of the motors on the other 6 cars to work twice as hard, increasing the wear and tear on the components, as well as increasing the likelihood of propulsion failure from overstressing the motors. While the T was actively keeping the fleet together with band-aids, things got a whole lot worse for the fleet throughout the next decade. Due to mismanagement with the MBTA and Mass DOT, the MBTA was not really allocating their money towards upkeep and maintenance, instead using that money to finance expansions and future projects. As a result of this, track work, routine fleet maintenance checks, sanitization, and cleaning system-wide declined substantially. However, for the 12s, it would be disastrous. The MBTA was already in the idea phase for replacing the Type 12s. This eventually spread to the staff at Wellington, which were going to start preparing the entire team and the facility for a brand new fleet. Unfortunately, due to the financial changes that were made in 1999, the MBTA was short on cash to properly upkeep and maintain their system, causing the crews at Wellington to begin neglecting the fleet of 12s in upkeep and cleanliness due to the lack of funds. Rust, corrosion, soot, and faded paint slowly began to overtake the cars as they were no longer receiving the proper care anymore. Joe Keefe also stated in the winter update video that the MBTA conducts routine inspections every 12,000 miles or every 8 to 9 weeks. Although by 2011, the routine inspections began lacking in overall quality due to the budget cuts, leading to many incidents where something that was overlooked in an inspection caused a major delay or public safety issue. On March 18, 2011, car 1225 traveling southbound to Forest Hills caught fire in between the stations of Malden Center and Wellington. All 150 passengers were safely evacuated, and the Malden Fire Department responded to the fire, determining the cause to be motor failure. 10 days later, on March 28, 2011, car 1228 traveling northbound to Oak Grove caught fire in between the stations of Chinatown and Downtown Crossing. The Boston Fire Department determined the cause to be sparks from the flange, igniting grease that was dripping from the brake shoes and starting a fire within the brake system. By 2014, the MBTA knew it was time for the old Hawker fleet to be replaced, and finally put out a bid for who could build the next generation fleet for the Orange Line. Bombardier, Kawasaki, and CRRC of China all put up bids for the project. Eventually, CRRC of China won the auction to build the new fleet, and the contract was signed in September of 2014. While CRRC began working on designing and manufacturing the new Type 14 fleet, the maintenance crews at Wellington began to intentionally defer maintenance to the existing Type 12 fleet, so they could speed up the process of removing them once the new cars started rolling in. From 2014 onward, the exterior of the 12s began to decline significantly, with sections of the exterior body of the cars completely eroding away from untreated rust. These holes that were formed from the untreated rust were temporarily fixed by the use of Bondo and by welding metal patches over the holes. Alongside this, due to the car's electrical public address system exceeding the age of 30 years old, the old analog PA systems on the cars began to do some funky things as several of the components that went into the main PA system began failing, producing some pretty funky chimes that would play for the doors and PA. Maintenance also suffered as well, with two more major incidents occurring in 2016. On February 16th of 2016, car 1309 stalled and caught fire while departing Back Bay Station, headed southbound to Forest Hills. The MBTA stated the cause of the fire to be the cars running over a loose metal panel that fell from the undercarriage, making contact with the third rail and starting a small fire within the relay system. On October 26th of 2016, northbound car 1231 caught fire at Back Bay Station when a motor overheated, filling the station with smoke, causing a mass panic with passengers smashing windows to escape. Things calmed down after these two incidents in 2016, and in 2019, the first set of the new Type 14 cars began non-revenue service runs along the main line. On August 19, 2019, the first set of Type 14s began revenue service with cars 1402, 1403, 1406, 1407, 1405, and 1404 making its inaugural trip from Wellington to Forest Hills. 10 days following this first revenue trip of the 14s, disaster would strike again for the Hawker fleet. On August 28, 2019, car 1203 traveling northbound between Malden Center and Wellington caught fire after a piece of the side skirt that was not properly fastened during a recent inspection made contact with the third rail, sparking a fire in the undercarriage, causing the base frame of the car to deform and warp from the heat while also frying critical propulsion and electrical equipment. After the blaze was extinguished, the MBTA inspected the remaining 118 cars and found the same problem present on 11 other cars. As a result of the damage caused by the fire on 1203, both cars 1202 and 1203 were permanently retired and now sat dormant in Wellington Yard, being gutted for parts to maintain the remaining 118 cars. Chapter 10: The End of the Line. By November of 2020, 22 of the new Type 14 cars were now in active service on the Orange Line. With deliveries of the new cars now in full swing, the MBTA began to start retiring the Type 12 fleet in slow increments. By December of 2020, 6 cars had been retired. By February of 2022, 16 cars were retired. Since the new cars were being delivered each month and space within Wellington Yard was running out, the crews moved the 16 retired cars to a siding on the north side of Wellington's yard. The siding was given the name the scrap line, since it was where the cars that were awaiting scrapping were being stored for the time being. Skipping ahead again, by July of 2022, more than 30 of the Type 12s were retired from active service and were now awaiting scrapping. During this time, the MBTA awarded a contract to Costello Dismantling to remove all 120 cars in 4 groups of 30. By July of 2022, 50 cars of the Type 14s were now in active service, 50 of which were having serious mechanical and safety issues, causing the entire fleet to be pulled from service repeatedly. Unfortunately, when the MBTA made the contract for the new Orange Line cars, they chose the lowest bidder out of the bunch to cut costs as they were already in a significant amount of debt. The builder, CRRC, who was chosen to manufacture the cars, had no prior experience or track record of building rail cars within the US. What came of this was years worth of manufacturing and maintenance problems with the new cars.
Orange Line trains taken out of service over noise concerns.
Surveillance video shows the moment an Orange Line train derails at the Wellington station. Watch closely as it comes around the corner. The MBTA blames pads on the train that wore faster than the T expected that they would. Those new Orange and Red Line trains are out of service until the problem can be fixed.
The MBTA is pulling all its new Orange Line cars off the tracks because of a brake problem on one train. The T says the trains will be out of service until it can pinpoint and fix the problem.
Leah, the T just confirmed all of the new Orange and Red Line cars have been pulled. Again, this after they say an out-of-service car had a battery failure while in the rail yard. Engineers now working to figure out the root cause of that. This is at least...
It was later revealed in 2023 that the CRRC factory in Springfield, Massachusetts, where the new fleet was being manufactured, was suffering from rushed construction that resulted in improper installation of critical components of the cars. This resulted in mechanical issues that jeopardized not only the safety of the public, but the operators as well. Fortunately, the MBTA still had the old Type 12s, although they were being held together by 15 years worth of cost-effective patchwork that was finally starting to corrode away. On January 31st, 2022, door E2 on a southbound Type 12 car failed to close and remained open while the train was in motion between the stations of Malden Center and Sullivan Square, when finally the entire train was taken out of service. The individual car was inspected closely, and the problem was determined to be ice buildup on the door tracks along the floor of the car. By this point, the public was beginning to show their frustration and fear of riding the MBTA due to the major safety incidents that were beginning to pile up, although this would not be the worst of them, as another horrific and tragic incident on the Red Line would occur in May of 2022.
A routine ride to work on the Red Line turned into a horrific death for Robinson Lawlin. Last April, his arm got stuck in the door as he left the train. Then it pulled away, dragging Robinson more than 100 feet to his death. It says the operator failed to double check if the platform and subway were clear of any passengers. The complaint adds the MBTA didn't properly inspect subway car doors and alarm systems.
Turning our attention back to the Type 12s, finally, on July 15th, 2022, lead car 1250, traveling southbound to Forest Hills, caught fire while passing over the Dana Bridge between the stations of Wellington and Assembly. With thick black smoke billowing high into the air, being caught by someone staying at the Encore Casino, the massive blaze sent passengers into a mass panic, smashing windows and dropping down an 8-foot drop onto the tracks with power to the third rail still live. One female passenger on board jumped off of the Dana Bridge into the Mystic River and swam to shore. Other passengers who decided not to do that followed the emergency evacuation instructions and were forced to walk back to Wellington. The entire incident caused a lot of media attention and scrutiny of the MBTA's safety and operational practices. The MBTA did disclose what the cause of the fire was, as well as surveillance footage was released as well. The MBTA stated that the fire was caused after a loose piece of the side skirt on 1250's front left corner dangled above the third rail, eventually making contact, sparking and causing the entire undercarriage to be set on fire. By this point, the public was really speaking out about the incident and drawing even more scrutiny and concern about the safety and reliability of the system. By this point, the Federal Transit Administration was conducting its investigation into the MBTA's overall operations amid the countless incidents on the system. Following the July 15th fire, the FTA had discovered that the MBTA's practices were jeopardizing not only the public, but operators and track workers as well. Later in July of 2022, the FTA submitted its final report on the MBTA. Included within this report was a list of items that would need to be addressed within the next few months if the MBTA were to continue operating without full oversight of the FTA. Given the pressure from the feds and the public, the MBTA decided to do something extreme.
Today we're announcing plans to accelerate major track and maintenance work on the Orange Line during a 30-day shutdown of the entire line from 9 p.m. on August 19th through September 18th, with service resuming on Monday, September 19th.
On August 3rd, 2022, a press briefing was held at Wellington, where then Governor Charlie Baker and the general manager of the MBTA, Steve Povtak, announced an unprecedented month-long shutdown of the entire Orange Line, beginning on August 19th and going until September 19th. The shutdown would allow the MBTA to complete a mile-long list of track and infrastructure upgrades that otherwise would have taken years to complete in just 30 days. Some of the work that was included in the shutdown was track work along areas with speed restrictions no more than 10 miles per hour, tie and joint replacements, signal upgrades, and station sanitization and cleaning. With this massive announcement now official, rumors began brewing within the railfan community that August 19th would be the last day the Hawkers would run in revenue service. People such as myself dismissed these rumors as just speculation, since at the time the track record of the Type 14s was not the greatest, since the mechanical and safety issues were being discovered almost on the daily. I specifically believe that all the manufacturing and quality control issues with the Type 14s would not be resolved by the time the Orange Line would reopen on September 19th. Unfortunately, that speculation would turn out to be true. On August 19th, 2022, the last set of 1200 series cars ran in revenue service with the consist of 1226, 1227, 1319, 1318, 1286, and 1287, making its last revenue run from Oak Grove Station to Forest Hills. Once reaching Forest Hills, the car was moved into the Forest Hills layover yard, where it would sit with the others while the line closed for the month-long shutdown. Let's quickly turn our attention to transit preservation. For the past 80 years, the MBTA, formerly the MTA, and before that, the Boston Elevated Railway, had donated most of their older retired rolling stock to the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine. Fans and enthusiasts of the MBTA had always counted on the Seashore Trolley Museum to preserve older transit rolling stock and history. The Seashore Trolley Museum even had bits and pieces of the Washington Street Elevated after it had been demolished back in 1987, with the head house from Dudley and Northampton stations being stored on the property. In 2009, the Seashore Trolley Museum received a few more trains from the MBTA. Boeing LRV streetcar number 3424 from the Green Line, and Hawker Siddeley Type 4 cars 623 and 622 from the Blue Line. Given the past acquisitions of old MBTA equipment, the railfan and train community within Boston began to hope that a pair of the Type 12s on the Orange Line would go to the Seashore Trolley Museum and be preserved. As I talked with people who were directly involved with the Type 12 acquisition within Seashore, they told me that cars 1252 and 1253 were selected as the cars that would be sent to Seashore, as they were the two cars that were in the best condition out of the entire fleet. When word was received that Seashore had done all the things necessary to acquire 52 and 53, the railfan community and myself breathed a sigh of relief that another piece of Boston transit history was being preserved. Unfortunately, this relief would soon turn to grief. A few months following the news, I received word from my contact that the 12 acquisition had fallen through. Due to a disagreement between management at the Seashore Trolley Museum, they ultimately rejected the acquisition of the 12s, and 1252 and 1253 were sent to Costello Dismantling, where they were destroyed on the property and ceased to exist, sealing the preservation fate of the Type 12s. Following the reopening of the Orange Line on September 19th, the public was pleased to hear that all the trains running on the Orange Line were the new Type 14 fleet. This decision, of course, came as an unfortunate change for the community who enjoyed riding and documenting the old Type 12s. During the shutdown, the crews at Wellington laid out all the cards on the table and had to decide what they were going to do when service resumed. The final verdict of this meeting was that they would run service with only the new cars. This choice to exclusively use the new cars was made out of safety. The crews at Wellington were faced with an ultimatum. As someone in my comments section of a previous video stated, either we continue running the 12s to keep people like Nick happy, or resume service with new cars and keep the system safe with cars that are newer, safer, and more reliable. A few days following the reopening of the Orange Line, on September 22, 2022, scrapping of the Type 12s began, with cars 1238 and 1239 being loaded onto flatbed trucks and shipped to Costello Dismantling, where they would be cut up. By January of 2023, 72 out of the 120 cars had been removed from the property and scrapped. Although the Orange Line was now running with just the new cars and scrapping had already been well underway, the remaining 48 Type 12s on Wellington's property were still listed as active on the NE Transit MBTA fleet roster page, or the website where the MBTA's fleet inventory is listed and updated. The community surrounding the 12s at the time held high hopes that the cars would return to revenue service given their active status on the roster. However, nothing ever happened. This active service status would last for an incredibly long time until April of 2023, when the NE Transit roster page was updated, listing all the remaining 48 Type 12s as out of service and awaiting disposition. Hey, Post Editor Nick here with a surprising new update on the Type 12s. On March 27, 2024, scrapping of the Type 12s officially resumed, with cars 1292 and 1293 being loaded onto flatbed trucks and sent to Costello Dismantling. 1293 was even spotted on I-93 southbound by somebody, and they posted to Instagram, which was where I found out about this initially. People within my community Discord server confirmed this to be true by sending in pictures of Wellington, and it looks like the yard crews have moved all the remaining 46 cars to the furthest tracks within the yard so that they can continue removing the rest of them. Of course, with scrapping officially resuming now after almost a year of no updates regarding the fate of the 48 cars, it looks like the MBTA is finally ready to junk the remaining 12s. And well, of course, with these new updates regarding scrapping, there have been yet again rumors regarding the preservation fate of a pair. There has been discussion within my comments section that an operator on the Orange Line has alleged that a pair will be rehabbed and saved. However, I personally highly doubt this. Of course, we will just have to see what happens, but as far as I know, the remaining 46 cars will be scrapped by mid-summer of 2024, if not sooner. But only time will tell. It is now March of 2024, and the 48 Type 12s have yet to be scrapped. At this point, the manufacturing issues of the Type 14s, for the most part, seem to have been figured out, as the deliveries of the new cars have begun increasing, with cars 1508 and 1509 being delivered in February of this year. They have yet to be put into active revenue service, but we'll see when that happens. There are now 48 Type 14s needing to be delivered and 48 12s needing to be scrapped. And of course, the railfan community and myself have been speculating that scrapping will continue once more, as space in Wellington has begun to run out. When scrapping will continue, that is, only time will tell. Unfortunately, as we've explored throughout this documentary, the physical preservation of these cars has been sealed, unfortunately, with Seashore rejecting the acquisition of the 12s and no other railway museum having any space or desire to save a pair. But that doesn't mean it's entirely doom and gloom, as I believe that they have already been preserved. Digitally, that is. The reason why I say this is because I've dedicated the years of 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 to filming them in 4K at 60 frames per second video and uploading their last years of revenue service to YouTube for the whole world to see. It took an extreme amount of dedication and time to do this, and I can wholeheartedly say that every moment spent archiving their final years was worth it, because now future railfanners of Boston will be able to experience these truly one-of-a-kind cars. And the whole reason why I even made this my life's work was because I remember riding the 12s as a kid, and I remembered how special and unique they were. When I rediscovered the 12s back when I started riding them again in 2018, I rediscovered their unique quirks, their charms, their imperfections, all of their individual characteristics. And well, I wanted to document that and share that with other people on the internet, as well as save it for myself in the future, because, well, at the time, I heard rumors that they were going to be retired within the next few years. And, well, I remember when I rediscovered the 12s back in 2018, I also remembered that they had sister cars, the 600s. And, well, the 600s were long gone by then. And, well, I wanted to try and find videos of the 600s so I could if I could see if they were similar to that of the 12s. And well, I went to YouTube, and well, I couldn't really find that many videos of the 600s on YouTube, because when the 600s retired back in 2009, YouTube was technically still in its infancy. The site had launched back in 2006, and it wasn't until around 2010, 2011 that YouTube really started taking off in popularity, with people uploading more than just home videos and actually putting some production quality into their content that they would upload to the platform. And in terms of MBTA content back then, it was pretty much non-existent. So videos of the 600s that actually had like motion video with audio with it were pretty much non-existent, besides a few people uploading it to the platform. And well, due to this dilemma, I realized the opportunity that I had. Technology of the internet and digital cameras had advanced a metric ton since 2009, and well, I took it upon myself to digitally preserve the 12s in the best format video and to upload that video to the most popular video sharing platform in the world. And well, the result of that is this. I have attracted a fan base who loves these cars as much as I do, and I have discovered a community of people around the MBTA. And back in 2018, I wouldn't have even conceived that all of this hard work would lead to this. It's still mind-blowing to me what these past 4 years of working with YouTube and documenting the 12s has brought me to. It's insane to me, and I'm so proud to have been along this journey for it. I'm speechless for this. I really am. These cars meant a lot to the people of Boston, and especially the railfan community, who cherished every last moment with them, including myself. Of course, it's sad to see them go, but as the saying says, all good things must come to an end. The crews at Wellington ultimately made the right choice to stop running them post-shutdown, as they, in all honesty, no matter how much us fans of the 12s want to deny it, they were not safe. It was time for them to go. The fire on July 15th was the nail in the coffin. After that, it was time for them to go. I am personally so proud to have been alive during these cars' service life, as they are truly one of a kind. All 120 cars have their own unique personality through their brake release noises, door chimes, PA chimes, their actual door closing mechanisms. Everything about them is unique. The Type 12s were an icon of Boston, and they were part of my childhood as I grew up, because I lived by the Southwest Corridor, and I remember when I was a kid, my mom would put me in the back seat of her bike and ride down the Southwest Corridor path, and I would hear those trains thundering down the tracks on the Southwest Corridor, and I would always tell my mom,
"Stop the bike, I want to see these trains."
If it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here. I'm so thankful for that. I will always have fond memories of these cars, and I have enjoyed every single moment that I have had with them during their final years. I feel like now is finally the right time to close the book on the legacy of the Type 12s, and to start a new chapter for what the Orange Line has in store next. And like I said, only time will tell, and I'm excited to see what the future will bring. But before I move on, I want to say one last thing. Thank you, everybody in my community, for watching my videos on the 12s. Thank you so much for contributing to the digital preservation of these cars. I would have never expected all of you guys to be this enthusiastic about the train cars as I have been. It's baffling to me right here, right now. It really is. I have met some incredible people throughout the last 3 years of their service life through our shared interest in the 12s. All of these people who I've met have become lifelong friends, and I am so happy. I can't even express how happy I am with how things have gone down. And, well, to end it off, keep rail fanning, keep foaming, keep doing what you do, keep watching my videos. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you so much for everything that you have brought to me. I cannot express my thanks enough. I really can't. And well, to end it off, I'm gonna do two things. Struggling here. Well, now that that's set to not in service, it's time for me to give my farewell to the Hawkers.
Here we go, last run of the Hawker Siddeley's. Choo-choo.
Passenger, this is going to be the last stop on the final destination for this train coming from Forest Hill Station. This is the last train going southbound. Most likely the last time you see these type of trains. Woo! In about a month we should get all new trains. Everything should be working up to par.
Ooh! There are two coming south. We take the first one, we get to Forest Hills, we film the second arrive. I've always been a fan of the very 70s faux wood interior. I think it's close to this. Let's see. Nice. So what do you think? What do you think about these old cars finally retiring? What do you think about these old cars retiring?
I actually like them.
Me too. I enjoyed them a lot.
I like classics,
So do I. I'm glad you and I share the same opinion.
Ones are very nice. You know, our customers from Boston deserve new things.
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah, see in a month when these cars are no longer here.
One of my favorite parts about these is manual hand crank roll sides. Man, this one's really hard to move. Pretty cool.
Gets to reminisce. Yep. Or 1300. 3 more stops. 3 more stops. 3 more stops. Alright, here we go. What a abominable sound.
You guys go. Close them up.
Two more stops. 2 more stops. One more stop. 1 more stop. 1 more stop. It's time to do the honors. because they aren't going to be anymore.